What's going on, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Gimme presented by Bet365. Why do we call it the Gimme? You guys know why. Because it's good this week on the PGA Tour schedule. It's the Mexico Open, the second edition of the Mexico Open that's actually been on the PGA Tour schedule. The event's been contested for decades and decades, but only the second year that it's on the schedule, playing this year again from Vedanta Vallarta down south of the border. I'm Jason Sobel. He's Roberto Arguello coming up. We're going to give you our favorite outright plays, our props, our first round leader bets, our one and done picks. We've got all the good usual stuff that we always do. But first, one reminder, the Gimme is presented by Bet365, the world's favorite sportsbook brand. Sign up with promo code ACTION, ACTION, to get Bet365's exclusive sign-up offer in New Jersey, Colorado, Ohio, and Virginia. Bet $1, get $365 in bet credits. Terms and conditions apply. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Let's take a look at the top of the Bet365 odds board. There he is, the Masters champion, the defending champion here, the guy with 4 wins under his belt already this year. Surprise, surprise. Jon Rahm's the favorite this week. I don't think that's a surprise whatsoever. And maybe not a surprise at how short he is, plus 260 in the marketplace. Ooh, we'll talk a little bit about Jon Rahm and whether there's value there. Roberto, you're already shaking your head. Yeah, can't touch plus 260. I get it. Might try to find some Rahm investments elsewhere. Tony Finau plus 800. Wyndham Clark 20-1. Gary Woodland getting a lot of steam. He's 25-1. Nikolai Højgaard at 30-1, and Patrick Rogers also at 30-1. As always, we've been given by our very benevolent bosses $100 to spend in our portfolios this week. We will spend every single penny of it. Let's start with some outrights. I am going to go first, and I mentioned number 2 on the board, and he is by far the second best player. I will tell you that Tony Finau has, I'll put it this way, his performance has outclassed his results so far this year. If you think about Tony Finau and how he's played, you're like, I'm really seeing him on a whole lot of leaderboards, and you're right about that. He was 7th at the Century Tournament of Champions first week of the year. Since then, has not finished better than that, only has one other top 10 finish, but the floor has been very high, nothing worse than 31st, which he had at the RBC Heritage just a couple of weeks ago. He is indeed 4th on the PGA Tour in strokes gained overall, and so I look at Finau as a guy who's due for some positive regression, at least as far as the results are concerned. Like I said, he is by far the number 2 player on the board this week. And so for as much as I think that Rahm is a bad bet for a short number that he is this week, for Finau at 3 times the number, I do like that play a lot. I'm going to put a quarter of my portfolio, 25% of my portfolio, on a guy who tied for second, just one behind Jon Rahm at this event last year, Roberto.
Yeah, it somewhat reminds me of Matt Fitzpatrick last year, who was leading the tour in strokes gained total, but hadn't won. And then he goes out and he wins the U.S. Open. So hopefully for you, Tony Finau takes it home this week. And I think it's only a matter of time before that putter gets hot for him and he wins one of these weeks. For me, I'm going to go with another guy who, if the putter gets hot, he could be really dangerous. And that's because he has really high upside from tee to green, although the short game does leave some, or maybe a lot, to be desired. And that's Luke List at 80-1. I'm putting $7 on him. He is, when I was doing my research, I was surprised to see that he's the highest ranked player in this field in strokes gained off the tee so far this season on the PGA Tour. And that's a big advantage because Vedanta Vallarta has the longest combined par 4s and 5s on the PGA Tour schedule. And also the fairways are really wide. So he's going to be able to gear back and swing that driver frequently throughout the rounds. And also the rough at just 1.5 inches is one of the least penal of any course on the PGA Tour. In addition, this course also has, so last year was the only year that this course has been played on the PGA Tour, and 44% of shots came from 200 yards or farther. And that is a big strength for Luke List as well. We mentioned the putter, not very strong for him. In his first 11 starts on the PGA Tour this season, gained strokes putting in as many as I did, and I did not play in a single event. However, in his last 5, he's gained strokes putting 2 times. Maybe that's not the most glowing review, but he's showing some signs of life. I got to follow him last week in our feature group coverage on PGA Tour Live, and I was surprised to see that I didn't hate his putting stroke. I think he's got enough upside from tee to green that if he is neutral around the greens and on the greens, or even a slight gainer, I think he can compete with some of the top dogs like Rahm and Finau. And at 80-1, I'll pay the price to find out. Who's your
Yeah,
second outright this week, Jason?
I do agree with that, and that Luke List. Look, usually a terrible putter. All he needs to be is average. He doesn't need to be great. He doesn't need to be the best on the greens this week. He just needs to be better than last, which he's been for much of this season. And you're right. You pointed out that he's been that over the last couple of weeks. So I do like taking a chance on him at a bigger number. I think that's a smart play. And you're also right about the fact that this is a bomber's paradise this week. There's very little rough. It's a big resort course, just bombs away all week. So I'm going to give a little advantage to the bigger hitters. And one guy who's had a lot of success very early in his young career on coastal resort courses in warm weather, that's Akshay Bhatia. He's only 21 years old. He won last year on the Corn Ferry Tour in the Bahamas. Earlier this year in the Bahamas on the same tour, he had a couple of top 10 finishes, also finished runner-up at the Puerto Rico Open. These are all sort of like, this is what we see from Victor Hovland on a regular basis. He gets on these types of golf courses and feels a sense of familiarity. Akshay, who I think in a week where everyone's got numbers that just look too short based on the fact that the field isn't very good, Akshay is the one guy whose number jumped out at me. He is at plus 9,000 in the Bet365 book right now, 90-1. And so I'm going to throw 10% of my portfolio on Akshay this week. I don't know if he can win yet. Again, still a very young player, very, very talented. Reminds me of a Davis Riley or a Sahith Theegala a year ago where their numbers were still too large. I'll take a chance on him, maybe catching lightning in a bottle this week. Again, at a course that should suit his game based on those correlations. All right, talk a little bit about Vedanta Vallarta. 7,456 yards. That seemed like a lot. Sure does, especially when it's a par 71. A ton of long par fours, long par fives. You got to bomb it out there. Paspalum greens, one of my favorite words in golf. Paspalum. Say it to yourself if you're sitting at home. It's fun to say. Let's get into the player market bets, Roberto. We're going to buy one. We're going to sell one based on the over-under finishing positions they've got on Bet365. Who you buying?
I'm going to stick with the theme of playing bombers who have some shortcomings around the greens, and that's going to be Joseph Bramlett, $12 for him to finish 48th or better. He's extremely long, one of the longest on the PGA Tour, but his approach play has elevated this year along with his around the green game, but specifically in his approach play, he's gained strokes on approach in 11 of the last 12 tournaments. So I think that gives him a pretty high floor, and in a field that's really not that deep, only 3 of the top 50 players in the official world golf rankings playing this week. I think that gives him a really strong chance of getting to 48th or better. And you mentioned the Paspalum greens. Not only is it fun to say, but it's also a really slow putting surface, which I think will kind of help the worst putters like a Luke List and a Joseph Bramlett and bring some of the best putters back to the pack like a Jon Rahm in this field. So I'm going to continue this trend of fading some of the better putters and backing some of the bombers who have putting shortcomings.
Yeah, I certainly like that play. I've got Bramlett on a bunch of DFS lineups. I think he makes some sense this week as well. There are times I look at the player finishing position market on Bet365 and like they'll just, it's like they're bouncing off the screen in neon lights. This week, the one that did that for me was Nikolai Højgaard. If you don't know this kid, coming into this year, we thought the twin Rasmus Højgaard might have been the better player. Maybe he still is, but Nikolai is making his mark on the PGA Tour. He's got top 5 finishes in 2 of his last 5 starts, and yet he's still at 26th or better. That's right, top 5s in 2 of his last 4, 26th or better in the marketplace at Bet365 this week. Smash it. A lot of people like Højgaard this week. Speaking of smashing, he's the guy that absolutely smashes off the tee, so he fits the profile of what we're looking for this week. All right, it's not easy to find someone to sell. Who are you selling?
I'm going to sell Beau Hossler for 33rd or worse, $18, my second biggest play this week. I like Beau Hossler. I love the Longhorns, but for him, this is a little bit of a sell high spot for me. He only has one top 10 spot or top 10 finish so far this season, and that came last week at the Zurich Classic of New Orleans, where he played with, in this field, the 3rd best player, Wyndham Clark. I think that Beau Hossler had a really strong putting week last week, and he is a great putter. But like I said, this paspalum surface might bring him back to the pack a little bit. And he's only finished 32nd or better in 3 of 10 starts so far in 2023. So I'm going to sell high on him with the slow greens hurting him a little bit as well. I think 33 or worse has some value.
Yeah, I'm going to do the same thing and basically look at recent results and play off of that. Maverick McNeely, over the last 2 years, the guy that I loved for floor plays. He was this generation's Charles Howell III, and I still think he can be this generation's Charles Howell III moving forward. But injured earlier this year, missed some time, and since he's come back, has not looked great. He's finished outside the top 39 in 5 of his last 6 starts. And so the reason I said top 39 is because he is listed at 39th or worse in the player finishing position markets at Bet365. I'm going to throw 10% of the portfolio on a Maverick McNeely fade, and that's not a long-term fade. I like him long-term. In the short term, though, I am staying away until he shows me that he's playing some better golf. Let's look at the market info for this week. The highest ticket percentage out there is on Gary Woodland at 11.7%. I think there's some validity to that. Gary Woodland's been playing some really good golf. I'll talk about him in just a minute. John Rahm, second. Tony Finau, third. Highest handle out there? Oh, people. What are you doing chasing the plus 260? It's John Rahm at 16.7%. Well, who's betting John Rahm at shorter than 3-1? Come on, people. Be smarter. He might win, but the number will be there. I don't know. Find better things to bet on it. Plus 260 that have more of a chance of getting you money. I don't know. Gary Woodland second, Wyndham Clark third, and the biggest liabilities out there. Woodland again tops the list. Højgaard right there. I think there's a lot of sharps on Højgaard this weekend. Again, Wyndham Clark rounding out that top 3. All right, let's get into our props and matchups. Roberto, give me a prop you like this week.
All right, we're going to get ugly with this one. I'm going Kevin Roy plus 250 for top 40. Kevin Roy has an elite long iron game, which should be rewarded this week. And once again, he is not a bad, but a terrible putter. So let's get into why we like him first. First off, he's third in proximity on approach shots from over 200 yards. And if you look at it from buckets between 200 and 225, 225, 250, and even though it's a pretty small sample size, 250 to 275, he ranks among the top 50 on the PGA Tour in each of those. Bear in mind, around 250 people played on the PGA Tour so far this year. Additionally, if you go down to 150 to 175 and 175 to 200, he's also in the top 40 in each of those strokes gained, or excuse me, on each of those proximities on approach. So really strong player from outside of 150 yards, which is over 60% of shots this week on approach. So that'll give him a really strong base to start off on. The problem is he's not great around the green and he's much worse with the putter. So once again, we're hoping that the slow surfaces help Kevin Roy out, like Luke List, like Joseph Bramlett, and they bring us home. Once again, he doesn't need to have a great putting week. He just needs to avoid complete and utter catastrophe.
Kevin Roy, the forgotten Roy sibling that didn't make it onto Succession. So he's still out there grinding on the PGA Tour while they're dealing with billions of dollars out there. So, oh well. I will go with my prop on Brandon Matthews, who he is the longest hitter on the PGA Tour. I know what the stats say. Rory McIlroy leads in driving distance. Brandon Matthews is second. Trust me, you put Rory and Matthews next to each other on the range and go, all right, guys, swing as hard as you can. Matthews is clipping him by 30. It's not even close. A lot of times last year when he was on the Korn Ferry Tour, he wasn't even putting a driver in the bag some weeks because he hits it too far. That's right. He hits it too far. This week, that won't be a problem. He can go out there and bang it. He's actually starting to play some good golf. It's been a struggle for him throughout his PGA Tour rookie season, but in his individual starts, 2 top 40s in his last 3. And then last week, paired with Sean O'Hare, finished in 7th place at the Zurich Classic. I think he's got some momentum going. I've been waiting for him to catch a little fire. I'm going to be cautious and just play a top 40 here at plus 175, $15 of my $100 portfolio. But I've got him in a lot of DFS lineups. And look, guys, these big hitters, we've seen it in the past. Saw it with Martin Trainer, who I like a little bit this week, back at the Puerto Rico Open 4 years ago. Sometimes these big hitters catch fire, and all of a sudden, the ceiling is the roof, guys. You might want to play him for an outright, too. He's trading at about 180 to 1 in that marketplace. So I don't mind a small sprinkle on Brandon Matthews outright as well. Roberto, let's talk matchups. Who you got in a matchup this week?
So yeah, coming off your Brandon Matthews analysis, I think a similar player to him is Cameron Champ. Cameron Champ, first on the PGA Tour in ball speed at an absurd 189 average, 189.78. Second, by the way, Brandon Matthews, a testament to just how freakish that guy is. But the difference between the two, Brandon Matthews trending in the right direction, Cameron Champ not playing very well right now. He has missed 6 straight cuts. I followed him on some PGA Tour Live featured holes earlier in the season, and he just didn't look very healthy, like bending over with his back, trying to grab the golf ball. It was concerning. But anyways, I'm betting MJ Duffy over him at minus 140 in a tournament matchup. Champ missed 6 straight cuts. I'm not sure about the health. He ranks outside the top 175 on the PGA Tour this season in strokes gained approach, around the green, and putting. So we know the driver is an asset for him, but you can't just hit the driver. And MJ Duffy, also a long hitter, but a much stronger player all the way around. Otherwise, I think he has a much higher floor than Cameron Champ. And I think as long as Duffy makes the weekend, I'm going to win this bet. And even if Duffy doesn't make the weekend, I could also see pathways to him still winning this matchup.
I love Duffy this week. First of all, 6 straight made cuts. The only little problem, things get a little tougher in the afternoon with the winds at Vedanta Vallarta. He's in the last group of the day on Thursday, which means on Friday, he's the last group of the morning wave, which means he's going to catch some of that early afternoon. So I think he gets screwed a little bit of the tee time, but he's playing some under the radar, very good golf right now. And I agree with you on Champ. Champ is just, he's lost right now. And so I think that's a very smart fade. I might like yours more than I like mine, but I'll give you mine. Gary Woodland. We heard the public is all over Gary Woodland. I don't mind it. I play him a little bit for an outright again. When I'm playing Tony Finau, it's tough for me to sprinkle across the board on some other short numbers, but I don't mind if you've got Woodland there. I'm going to take him in a matchup, though, against Patrick Rogers. Patrick Rogers getting a lot of love in the marketplace just based on 2 good results that were each about 3 or 4 weeks ago. Nah. I mean, it's been a long time for Patrick Rogers, and he plays a lot of just average golf that never really reaches his potential. It's minus 125. I don't love that number. I usually like even number plays or something close to it, but I just felt like there was too much of an advantage on Woodland this week, who's obviously a long hitter, and the iron game has been very, very trendy so far this year. I'll throw $10 on that. All right, let's get first round leaders, Roberto, because I know you've got 2 of them. Who are you starting with?
Yeah, I wanted to do more first round leader bets this week instead of outright since I didn't love the board there. But my first one's going to be Nikolai Højgaard. You mentioned him earlier. You're betting on his upside, and I'm doing that as well. I don't know about him putting it together for 4 straight rounds at relatively the same price for first round leader. So why not do it for first round leader? Unfortunately, he does have one of those afternoon tee times, but this guy is electric. You mentioned his driver, how long he is. He's only 22 years old. Last week, he nearly had the best shot, arguably in PGA Tour history, outside of pressure and circumstances. He lipped out. It hit the flagstick on a par 4, the par 4 16th over at the Zurich Classic of New Orleans at TPC Louisiana. Fortunately, he missed the putt, but he could have had a hole in one on the par 4. There's only been one other one in PGA Tour history, and that one was because it deflected off of a player's putter. So not an unobstructed hole in one on a par 4. Anyways, this guy's electric. He's only played really great golf since he's gotten to the PGA Tour. He got that special temporary status, and his strokes gained approach per round, gaining 1.3 strokes. He hasn't played enough rounds to qualify for the PGA Tour's season-long stats. However, if he were to keep up that pace, that would be leading the tour. I think that he has so much upside, and for one round, if Rahm has a slow start out the gates or Tony Finau, it's going to be wide open, and I think he's got as much upside as just about anybody else.
What's better, a hole in one on a par 4 off another player's putter, or the hockey goal last night, Edmonton Oilers, I think it was Zach Hyman off his face that deflected right into the goal. I'd probably still take the hole in one. Hyman doesn't have to buy drinks for the rest of the team if he scores a goal off his face. So at least he's got that going for him, even if he needs some stitches or something afterwards. All right. I know you've got one more first round leader bet. We'll get to that in a second. Look, I've told you all about how I ain't betting Jon Rahm this week. Plus 260. Unless you guarantee me the victory, I know he's the best player in the field. I know he won last year. I get all these things. Just look, it's golf and things happen. That said, if you're looking for an investment on John Rahm, who plays in the morning when it should be nicer out, better conditions, he's plus 1,000, 10 to 1 as a first round leader play. All John Rahm has done on the PGA Tour this season is put up a round one scoring average of 67.60. That leads the PGA Tour in Thursday scoring. I love the fact that John Rahm can go out there early and post a number. I'm not so sure that I love playing a John Rahm first round leader, but not winning the golf tournament. I don't know about that parlay this week, and that's kind of what I'm looking for. But look, if I win my Thursday bet on Rahm, everything else is gravy from there anyway. I'm going to take 20% of the portfolio and throw it on Rahm as a first round leader play. Who's the second guy?
Yeah, I love that way of betting Rahm this week if you want to go about betting him. I'm going to bet Will Gordon, a guy who has shown that he's a strong first round player. And I still think he's got some untapped upside that will prevail at some point this year on the PGA Tour. So I wanted to back him in this first round market where he is seventh on the PGA Tour in round one scoring average at 68.75. He's got boomer bust potential. We could get the guy who was 8 under through 15 holes at Pebble Beach. We could also get the guy who went 5 over those last 3 holes at Pebble Beach in the first round and ended up missing that cut. You never know what you're going to get with Will Gordon, but I think he's going to flash at some point, and I like this market as a way to getting some kind of exposure to that.
Oh, you said Flash and Gordon. I got that. I caught on to that one. Flash Gordon. All right. By the way, Will Gordon top 10 was my best bet at the Action Network's best bets file that we do every single week. And somehow I just couldn't work him into the show. But yes, I'm with you on Gordon. 7 of his last 8 starts, strokes gained, approach shots in the positive numbers. The results are coming. Positive regression. All right. One and done play. We do it at the end of every show. I think this is very interesting this week because the big names, you've either used Rahm or you're saving Rahm. Probably the same about Finau. And then, well, we got a whole lot of other guys to choose from. Where are you going with yours?
I'm still saving Rahm for a little bigger purse, but I'm going to play Finau this week. I was really close to playing Rahm. I'm playing Finau. He's the clear-cut second best player in the field. You mentioned how consistent he's been, 12 straight top 31 finishes. I think it's pretty clear-cut.
Yeah, I've got sort of the same strategy here. You're not betting Finau, but you will take him in a one and done. I'm not betting Wyndham Clark. 16, 18, 20 to 1, wherever that number is falling in your book right now. That's just too short for me on a guy who's never won, but he's been tremendous. He hasn't missed a cut yet this year, 5 top 10s. So I will play him for one and dones. I think he's a really smart play in that market as well. So let's take a little look at the recap here. Roberto's got Luke List for an outright. First round leader plays on Will Gordon and Nikolai Højgaard, buying Joseph Bramlett, selling Bo Hostler, prop on Kevin Roy, and a matchup on MJ Duffy. I've got outrights on Tony Finau and Akshay Bhatia, buying Højgaard, selling Mav McNeely, a prop on Brandon Matthews, matchup Gary Woodland, first round leader bet on John Rahm. All right, before we go, one non-golf pick for the people out there. Who you got?
I'm going Hendon Hooker draft position over 30.5 at plus 150. He's 25 years old, played in a somewhat gimmicky Tennessee offense, although they did upset Alabama. Shout out to him for that incredible performance. I don't think he's going to be in the first round, especially coming off of a torn ACL.
Speaking of Alabama, I had Ryan Leaf, draft analyst and football expert and good friend of mine on the radio show today. He said number 2 is going to be Will Anderson. He really likes him going to the Texans. And so if he says it, I'm buying. I'm going Will Anderson in that number 2 spot. Remember, Green Dot Daily is going to break down the draft and everything else that you're looking for. 3:00 Eastern time every single day on your favorite Action Network platform. That's all we got, folks. Thanks for watching this episode of the Gimme presented by Bet365. Remember, for more content this week and every week, check out actionnetwork.com and the Action app. For Roberto Arguello, I'm Jason Sobel. Good luck with all your bets for this week's Mexican Open. Here's hoping you hit the green.